Welcome. Brad's house. Nothing special. It's another dump in Long Beach. You know, I call home.
Guys, welcome back to Brad's house. This wasn't the intro that we started with, but we kind of lost our intro with the filming we did. But welcome back, and we're gonna head back to the back. We're gonna get started on the T-bucket, and we're gonna show you guys how to build an LS with my son and our favorite guy, Gary.
So this has been funny because this has been sitting here forever, but this is Gary's camping van, camper. This is where Narina and go and camp. And literally we have the toilet and the vanity for the back bathroom that I'm remodeling right now that's getting done. The block, thank you CPR, Martin. Well, I'll put a link down there. He got the block all machined ready. He balanced the pistons and the rods. Some new lifters, basically the plug kit. Everything's ready to go here to be assembled. The crank is polished and balanced. So this motor is gonna run a factory crank. This is a budget build, so anybody who wants to do this build, I'm gonna let you know that this is probably one of the more inexpensive builds that I'm doing. Total investment, right around $3,000. That's pistons, rods, bearings, lifters, everything like that is new. I reused the crank. So it's gonna be a 347 cubic inch motor, which is 5.7 liters. Just basic stuff. Everything anybody else can do, we're gonna do right here. Yeah, I want to thank Doug, Motion Raceworks. Thank you, Doug. These things are insane. So not only does it have a place to hold your bolts when you're not using it, this is the lift plate for all LSs. So it goes right there. It makes it super easy to get on and off and to lift your motor. So thank you, Doug. You're amazing.
Wait, teach him about the olden days.
The olden days? This is an old school tool because somehow I forgot to charge the battery for the other tools. So look, Brody, you put this on right here and you hold it here and you go like this. This is before power tools.
Before Christ.
Oh. Hey! Gary, you came to learn how to build an LS? These are reliable motors. Well, you know, I mean, there is that. Here, so we'll answer a question right now because that's one of those ones. What happened to the Cadillac? So, the Cadillac, unfortunately, we don't have the Cadillac anymore. So, we're out and got a hybrid Lexus for Brad to drive to work and be his normal everyday car. So, no more Caddy. I'm really sorry, Caddy lovers. I love the car too, but now we have the Lexus. Peace out on the Caddy. Yeah. Okay, so guys, this is the book that I do to install. I don't remember everything because I'm old, and this is the book that I bought to do the installation. I'm not paid by this company, and I actually just chose this one. And we're gonna actually probably not quite do everything on this pre-assembly procedures. The pre-assembly procedures are a lot of this stuff, the miking of the crank, the miking of the pistons, and main bearing clearances. I'm cheating. So what I do on my assemblies is I take my block, I take my crank, I take my pistons and my rods, and I buy my bearings and I bring them to Martin at CPR, which really hates me for doing that because I buy cheap rods and cheap pistons and he likes to sell good stuff and I bring him the Chinese stuff, but whatever. And he actually takes each one of these rods apart and clearances them so that they're exactly right. So I don't have to do any of this stuff. Now this stuff is important, and that is checking your main bearing clearances, your rod clearances, and your pistons, and it can be done, and I could do it here in the garage, but at that point, it's just better for me to pay for him to do his job, and his job's done right, and then all I have to do is assembly. So if you get this book and you get all like flustered with these assembly procedures with all the plastic gauges and the micrometers and all that stuff, you can just go to your machine shop, which our local one here is Martin at CPR, and you can have him pre-do all of that stuff for you so that all you're doing is assembling your block. So first things first is dropping our crank. We're gonna get that stock crank, we're gonna get the bearings that we bought, we're gonna clean up all this part right here, take these caps off. We're gonna pay attention to the way these caps come off because they're numbered. So as you see right here, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, this is number 4, and this is number 5 cap. And they have it written right here, all right? What I'm gonna do, just so Brody can assemble it real quickly, is I'm gonna take a paint pen. I'm gonna write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that when he knows, he can put these back together the same way. Also, I'm gonna write an arrow. The arrow is always facing the same way, so that when he puts the caps back on, he knows that the caps go with the arrows the same direction. So, my favorite thing in this assembly is paint pens. I like to get bright ones, white, blue, red. These are my favorite. After you tighten and torque bolts, paint pen it. That means you know you're done, you know that's finished. So, right now, we're gonna go with red. We're gonna get Brody to mark all these up. Like number 1, a lot of people, their writing is like doctors. So if I wrote a 1, it would look like a 7 or something else. So what I like to do is dots. 1 dot, 1 dot, 2 dots, 2 dots, 3 dots, 3 dots, 4 dots, 4 dots. And if you have to put one on there, you're probably dumb because you know that's the last one. Anyway, so now we're gonna do arrows. And then I'll go on the block because I know I'm taking the block off, and I'll put the arrow. Now, all these go that same way, correct? Are we all familiar with this? Brody, Marina, at the end of the day, everybody here is going to be building LS motors, including Gary.
Yeah.
You can tell he's excited because he wants a reliable motor in one of his cars one of these days.
I mean, you've blown up 4 of these just doing burnouts.
It's what you happens, like you might have to like do things to try to impress people that doesn't matter. That's what happens.
I guess, I mean...
You didn't fall into that, like, suckerism. Like, we didn't sucker you into those, right?
What? You can't be a hustler and get suckered? What?
I got suckered, you know?
Back in the day when I was calling those 1-900 numbers, maybe.
Oh, I'm single. Maybe I should get some of the 1-900 numbers.
Oh no, I was calling Miss Cleo to see if my future would rely on getting a Charizard in my Pokemon pack.
Oh, that wasn't the number that I wanted to call.
No. The number you want to call is for lonely single dads.
Very much so. What's weird about this motor is 15 on the outside, and I want to say these are 13s. I keep forgetting about that, but it's funny that they use such an odd size numbers in here. All right, Brody, go ahead and let's get all this stuff off, all this hardware off. I'm gonna make you a nice little area right here with a clean thing, and what I want you to do is just take these bolts loose, pick this whole cap up with the bolts on it, and set it down right here. Does that make sense?
Minimum leverage?
Oh yeah, he ain't getting that off.
Yeah, look at him. He not as strong as you yet, maybe.
I couldn't get that off.
How you think your dad set you up for failure, Brody? There you go. So,
There you go, and then you can go like this.
Hit your son.
you just got to put a little bit of MAN on it, you feel me?
So how you know they're loose is do this. I call it the bolt dance. You know, it's open and closed, it's not touching anything.
No, you got to use a 13 for that one, Brody.
All right.
So do these outside ones first, and then do the inside
Come
ones
back here
next.
to your inside one. So what's super strong about LS motors that normal motors don't have, they're 4-bolt mains. So a lot of times I used to talk about in the olden days, I had a 2-bolt main or a 4-bolt main car. That's how many bolts held the crankshaft down into the case. Well, LS's come with a 4-bolt main. Now what they have is what's called splined 4-bolt mains. Spline would actually mean that 2 of the bolts are on an angle in order to keep these caps from falling off. Well, LS stepped it up and they put 2 bolts on either side in order to keep this cap from pulling up. So that's a positive about why these motors are so strong, and these motors can take the power they can, and the factory cranks and the factory bottom ends work the way they do. And that's because of all of this hardware. Bigger thing is you want to keep these areas super clean right here. Never put grease or oil underneath your bearings. That's a mistake. Like people are like, oh, I gotta get assembly lube. And if you put assembly lube right here on the back side of the bearings, you'll have a chance of what's called spinning the bearing, where the bearing will spin, because it's not actually supposed to spin there, it's supposed to be locked in there. So you can look alongside here and you can tell that this one right here is super thin this way versus these. Can you see that, Brody? Mm-hmm. Okay, all motors will have what's called a thrust bearing. A thrust bearing is just like you think sexually, thrust. And that's the crank moving forward and backwards. Some of the thrust bearings are on the back side of the motor, some of the thrust bearings in the center of the motor. It all matters through the manufacturer. Our manufacturer did the thrust bearing in the middle of the motor, and you can tell because it's actually skinnier here than all of these. So when you get your bearings, they come like this. These are your bearing halves. And I want to thank King Bearing. You guys are amazing. Thank you for waiting for us to get this put together. This is a sponsored part. These are the bearings that I use in all my motors. They have a couple different styles, like a full-on race bearing, middle, and basically a bottom line rebuild. These are the middle row bearings. I've had no issues with these. These tend to be really efficient for what we use them for. This is your oddball bearing. You notice that how these are all the same? And this is your weird one. This is your thrust bearing. So this bearing is actually going to be the one that goes in the middle. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to split these up and we're going to put half of them in. Now if you look, they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you put these bearings together, 1 needs to go with 1, 2 needs to go 2, 3 needs to go 3, 4 needs to go with 4. Does that make sense? Now it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in position 1, 2, 3, 4. But we will do that. We will just follow cadence, just because everybody with OCD out there is going to go nuts on this build. Now I'm going to tell you guys right now, don't follow me. You don't have to like do this the way I do it. This is the way I build motors. So this is not necessarily the right way. This is the way I build motors. So if you're going to go become a keyboard cowboy and tell me how I don't build my motors right, I really don't care. So go with that. Now here's a key. There's a little lock rod right there. All right, now if you were just to throw these bearings in without paying attention, you could do something wrong. If you look, there's little notches for that lock. Well, if I look at this bearing and I try to put it in like that, that lock doesn't have any place to go. Or if I flipped it around, that lock has no place to go. So it's super hard to do this wrong. I mean, you could put it in there, but obviously it's not right. If you look at this bearing, the lock, which I'm talking about, that little piece right there, and I shouldn't be holding these with my bare hands. That's why I asked him to put gloves on.
Why
so
is
again, your oils on your hands have acids in it. Those acids can break down the coatings that are on these bearings, which they don't like. So generally you want to wear gloves so that your hands aren't. We're gonna beat the fuck out of this motor. It probably only lasts a year. So I'm just gonna blame Brody when it breaks because I'm having him assemble it. That's how corporate people do it. In a corporate world, you have a boss and you have everybody below you. The reason why they have the people below you is so when the mistakes are made, they can point their fingers at them. So we're gonna go corporate world here. Thanks, Bobo. You didn't hear any of that. So do you want to put this bearing in, sir? Right? Just go ahead and give it a little. Yeah, you can karate chop it in.
Good.
No. That's good. So how you can tell is this is going to be flush with this. Gotcha? So let's go ahead and unpackage these ones. And you see how that says number 1? I want number 1 to go here, number 2 to go here, number 3 to go here. And I want you to pay attention to where the locks are and where those locks are. So this part I'm not gonna do for you. You need to do it right, or you're gonna fuck the motor up. I mean, you're gonna mess the motor up. Pressure's on, boys. Here, I'll hold your box for you.
Ready, Brody, you ready for all this pressure, bro?
So
This
here's
is the life of your dad's car, your future car. You gonna give him this car when he get older?
if he wants to drive, he more than welcome can.
It's not gonna make it.
So we made the first mistake right there. Look, so we got to grab the other package. This is the top side. Put that one back. I just noticed that right now.
This man is 10 minutes.
Setting him up for
into
failure right off the bat.
He's about to have his whole kid blow his motor.
This is really sticky stuff, and just go down right here, and then do that to all of these. Okay. This is the assembly lube that we're gonna set the crank on so that it has lubrication for us to turn it over. I want to take your finger and just go over everything.
What's these holes in the bearings?
So the holes right here and this little mark right here are for the oil pressure to come through and lubricate the crank. So when you're losing oil pressure, like what we did in that motor I was complaining about, was because this bearing was weared out and the oil was squishing out and coming out of the crank and not actually pressurizing where it goes around the crank, keeping the crank lubricated. So we ate this one and this one on the last block that came out of there.
Which ones?
These two were gone. And I want to say I have the piston somewhere. They might be over there. They got really hot, like hot, and ate the crank bad. So this is my fault. The piston is actually in good shape. I could take this piston off, clean it up, reuse it. But I didn't change the oil and I let my E85 contaminate my oil. So I wasn't getting proper lubrication and I was driving the car, just not changing the oil. And E85 and non-proper lubrication, you can see the damage that was caused. So this was the big 408 H-beam forged motor. It's trash now. This is our crankshaft. This is a factory stock crank that will easily make 1,000 horsepower. All we had to do was balance it, polish it, have all the special stuff done by CPR. So we're gonna drop this bad boy in here.
How do you know?
Be very careful not to do any knocking around and damaging. And there we go. And we can tell, see how beautifully that just slides around there. So now what I call this, and what the motor builder that I learned from, was called the turn test. That's the crank bolt that goes in this. Now throughout this whole assembly, if you do this turn test, literally you're checking your clearances. I know everybody's gonna hate me on the internet for that, but I learned from an old guy, dude. And I like that old guy. He taught me well.
What old guy?
Well, which old guy? It was actually Roger from Roger's European. It was the guy that showed me how to do that. And we built Volkswagen motors. We built a ton of Volkswagen motors. And Volkswagen motors suck. I'll basically tell you that right now. They don't last long. What did you do with your breaker bar?
It's right behind you.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
He told me if you're ever building a motor and you're not turning it, you shouldn't be building the motor. And that's because when you turn it, you can actually feel the resistance that the motor's being put into as you're doing the torques on the world. So like, go ahead and like feel the smoothness of this. That should barely or rarely change. Throughout this whole assembly, you're gonna have friction from when you put the pistons on. You're gonna have friction from when you put the caps on. But you should never feel like a rough spot. Like if it's not super just like so nice and so smooth, you've got a problem. And as you assemble this, you turn this. You never assemble and then go to turn. No. Keep turning the whole time you're assembling. Every time you put something on, turn it. Because at that point, if you feel something weird, you need to stop, back up, and figure out what your problem is. All right, Brody, I want you to turn that and feel that. All right? So now, all of these things, you need to put these bearings in and put them back in. So we're gonna start with the weird one, and that's the middle one. All right? We're gonna take these bolts out.
Now, when you build your motors or engines or whatever you want to call them, do you torque yours to spec, or do you go at least 5 to 10 pounds over?
So that's kind of a hanger on that. These are factory bolts down here. So these bolts are actually torque to twist. It's a different type of torque deal. They torque to a, so like you have to put this on and you torque to 120 degrees or to 90 degrees. They don't torque to pounds. So some bolts are yield, like they yield for foot-pounds. LS bolts are supposedly one-time use bolts. You put them in once and you're supposed to throw them away. We kind of reuse the bottom crank bolts, but we don't use the head bolts. The head bolts we throw away. If you bought new head bolts, they don't torque. You put this on and you put this little deal to like 0, and then you torque it to whatever the number they say, like 180 degrees or 90 degrees, and it's torqued to the degree. So we're gonna torque all these to a degree, and then when we put the heads on, we will do torque to pounds. Now the heads, I use studs. I actually use a stud with a nut, which is in factory. Factory is a bolt. We run boost and boost like studded motors. So the only advantages is it's got better clamping pressure. It holds it down better. So on the heads, I do run 5 more pounds of regular torque. So you're right. I do kind of get on them a little better, but it's a better hardware. So yeah, goob it up, slap it down, tap it down.
Fine if I get lube in these bolts.
You can get that lube wherever you want.
Ooh.
You'll never complain about having too much lube. I'm telling you that right now. That's a life. Teach him young, right? He's 14. He needs to know this stuff. Mom will do. So here's our main cap tightening procedure. As we were talking about, tighten your inner main cap bearings and tighten your outer main cap bearings. And here's that little tool that I was showing you. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna first do the initial tight at 15 foot-pounds, which is really nothing. That's like about a wrist tight. And then to finish this, we're gonna do an 80 degree, see, inner main bends is additional 80 degrees. That C-utilized fastener and stretch, that'll show you on page 18 how to do the degree mark. But I'll show you guys how to do that. 80 degrees on the outer, and then we'll go to the inside, and I believe inside is 18 degrees foot-pound, and then I gotta read this now. This is how long it's been since I did this. 51 degrees. So it's 81 and 51. I want to say I marked that on this the last time I did it. I did. Look, 51 right there and 81 right there. The little black marks. The last time I did it. So I cheated. Right. So now we get to jump on this funny tool. And this is the torque to degree deal. Now we're gonna start again in that same order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You know, it's a thing that Vargas got tattooed on his rotary wrist. And we're gonna put this little guy on here. So we go to here. This is where it gets kind of technical. We put this on, and we have to mount this so that this doesn't move. All right, it does. I like to put it wherever, you know, it can stay pretty hard from knocking off, and that holds this dial basically in one position. All right, now you got to unloosen this guy right here, and you need to turn this to 0. See this little pointer right here? Mm-hmm. That little pointer right there? You need to put that guy at 0. Boom, right at 0. All right, then you tighten that guy right back up. So now it's sitting at 0. Now what's gonna happen is when you put your wrench on here and you turn this, this is gonna show a degree. And we wanna go all the way to 80 degrees. Now what I had done before, and it's almost worn off right now, is I put a little paint dot there. So that way I can kind of know. Now, if I was to use this degree thing on a lot of motors, I probably wouldn't put these dots. But since I only really build LS's, I can go ahead and just give me a little indicator that when that pointer gets to here, that's about where I'm at. And that's the end. Now, give it, this isn't a perfect world and that this isn't perfect, I'm gonna go on that side of the paint dot. You know the paint dot's pretty wide or whatever the pin mark's got. I'm gonna put that pointer on the far side of the paint dot. So it's gonna be a little more than 80. But if you think about it, that's only 80, 81 degrees. It's not like 80 to 90 degrees. That way I can ensure that I just know that thing's tight. So Brody, I want you to grab the big torque wrench, which is this one here. And then this one again, I want you to go up here. Okay, and I want you to come over here and hold this, but I want you to look at that little dot right there, that guy right there, right? I can even paint it red for you so that you can see it even better. Okay, now I want you to turn it until it touches that red, okay? Now go. Keep going. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Keep going. Keep going. Now that might be a lot of weight for you here. I'll help you. Now I didn't realize it's probably right around 80 foot-pounds. So there you go. That's torque, okay? So now we gotta go to this one, all right? And we gotta start this whole procedure all over again. So we gotta take this off, unloosen this, go back to 0, 0 start, right there. Okay, Brody, and again. Now, what I like to do here for, like, you're a little guy, right? And it's hard to do. So if you stood by me right here, and you see how I'm pulling it, you're gonna pull it and it's gonna be so much easier, see? Click up. Right there, 80. That is hard. I'm not gonna lie. Even for me, that's a little bit of a butthole. All right, guys. So right now, instead of boring you guys with like an hour's worth of doing this over and over and repeatedly, what we're gonna do is build the pistons. I'm gonna build a piston and then I'm gonna give it to Brody and he's gonna drop it and torque it down. In building a pistons, all we're doing is we're loading the rings, filing the 2 top rings so that they have the right ring gap. Those are secrets that each motor builder does themselves. I follow the recommendations that the piston manufacturer gives us, so you can go by that. And then building the rod. So basically putting the wrist pin in, putting your circlip in, and getting ready to load the motor. So I'm gonna build pistons, not bore you guys with that. We'll give you a little show of how Brody puts the piston in the block and torques to yield the crank. But right now we've got about an hour of piston building. So, all right, so now we're gonna do ring gaps. And ring gaps are specific to pistons. And the ring gap is actually the measurement between here when this is collapsed in. So when you set this in the bore like this, and the trick is to making sure that they're square when you put them down there because you don't want them like crooked. So what you do is you just take a piston and slide it in, push it down just a little bit like that, see? Now because this piston goes up and down in this bore pretty much straight, you know your ring gap is set up exactly where you should measure it. So now we got to figure out what the ring gap is. Like right now, what is it stock? And you're just trying to shove a bunch of these in the middle until it doesn't fit. If you guys see what we're doing, we're adding these 2 top numbers. That plus that is 27. So we're gonna put those together and see where we're at. Okay, too much, so it's 25. 25 is what we're gonna call that gap right there. Now, I gotta look up what our ring gap should be. So I looked it up right now and it's 5.7. Standard 0.25 is the actual ring gap for this. So if each one of these ring at a 0.25, we basically could load the rings without having to do any filing, which is amazing, meaning
They're all good?
bore to fit. All right, so this is inside, this is outside, right? This little chamfer goes like that. It goes towards its outside. So you gotta put this little chamfer that way. These flat spots ride together. So on the rods, there's 2 different ways these rods are. These are chamfered sides. Flat sides, you can see the difference between the flat and the chamfered. Flat sides ride together like this. So when you build these motors, you got to make sure that chamfered side's sitting out here. Does that make sense? All right, that's it. Okay. So, go ahead and put that one in. No. Put your bearing in. Stop, Brody. Come back here. You're getting nervous in the camera. What is not in here?
Oh.
Number 1 and number 1. So number 1, bearing with a little tab right here. There you go. All right. Now you can put a little lube in here, and you gotta wait till we drop this. Okay. So we gotta drop this in.
That rolled off by itself.
It's all right. We turned our crank all the way down so that the rod is actually away. We have to get it all the way up because it makes it easier for this to sit in there. So now we're gonna put this in here like this, and we're hopefully gonna tap this guy in. Let me see that. And it's going to go in flawlessly. And goes in like that. So now we're gonna have to put that bearing back in. Let's just spin it over. It'll be easier to push this up with it upside down. You can put that bearing back in. Wipe it down. Super clean. So we're gonna push this back up. You have to reach your hand in there and put that bearing back on.
Wipe this down?
Wipe this down because it fell on the ground.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
And then...
Okay, now I want you to reach in there and put that one back on. See, it's right there. Tab up. See how I walked that right back into that? All right, our flat side is over here, our chamfered side's over here. So now, I should be able to give it back to you all the way up here. Oh, and see how the bearing slid out? So we have to like push that guy back in there. All right, here we go. Now it's up here at top. It's ready to go. Where's your cap? Let me see your bearing. Let me see your bearing real quick. What I'm trying to do is make sure that this is flat here, this is flat here. Okay? All right, now you see the cap. Chamfer side, flat side. So give yourself some oil right here. Right there. Good. All right. Chamfer side, flat side. Or I'm sorry, chamfered side, flat side. So it goes like this. Go ahead and put your bolts on. Now these are ARP bolts, so these get torque to yield. We're gonna go ahead and just lightly tighten them down right now. And once we get all of these rods on here, we'll go back through and roll the motor over and then do the torquing. So we're not necessarily worried about getting them torqued to yield right now. I just want to get all the rods on the motor. I want to get them lightly, like we'll put them at like 20 foot-pounds of torque right now. And what we're going to be doing is, Brody, grab that nut. We've got to spin that. We want to make sure that we have no resistance, no added resistance. You know, something that feels funky or weird, like when we have that cap back there kind of touch the back.
But there will be resistance.
There's going to be resistance because of the rings. But you need to feel that resistance. It should be smooth. See how it's smooth? So like, if you were to have an issue right now, you would have a notch. Or like a funky like, yeah. kind of like the flex plate in that car. Jing, 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 jing. That's what you're gonna hear. That scrapey sounds fine. That's just the cylinder rings going up and down. And in fact, if you want to get rid of that cylinder rings and foul first set of plugs, take some of your assembly lube and go like that. And now turn it over again. And watch it go away. Is it getting a little more lubricated?
Sort of. It's now.
That's fine. Let it drip out. That's a good deal. Alright, so in loading these pistons, this is a oil control ring. It basically goes on top of this little wavy ring right here. And I screwed one up when I was loading the piston. And then I tried to go rob another set off of another set of pistons I have. But they're just too big. So I have to stop and wait and go get another set of these oil control rings that go around this piston. And that was my fault because I had this thing set up improperly, tried to load it, and it pinched it. So we gotta stop and start another day. But thanks for coming, thanks for watching. Get back to us in a few more weeks. We'll have more content. We're gonna get the T-bucket motor, the Tacoma motor, and everything all done. How's it feel, Brody?
Lots of resistance.
Lots of resistance, huh?
Try it. I don't know if it's...
Oh yeah. No, that's perfect. Yep.